as we know, we've got 4 women who've come forward in this Sunday Times and Times newspaper joint investigation with Channel 4 Dispatches. That documentary went out on Friday night and has caused something of a storm. Russell Brand issued a statement ahead of those allegations, and here is what he had to say on his YouTube channel on Saturday evening.
Amidst this litany of astonishing, rather baroque attacks are some very serious allegations that I absolutely refute. These allegations pertain to the time when I was working in the mainstream, when I was in the newspapers all the time, when I was in the movies, and as I've written about extensively in my books, I was very, very promiscuous. Now, during that time of promiscuity, the relationships I had were absolutely always consensual. I was always transparent about that then, almost too transparent.
Almost too transparent, he says. Well, let's talk about this with media lawyer Howard Kennedy. Mark Stevens, CBU, joins us. Good morning to you, Mark.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Look, we must make it very clear. These allegations have been made, 4 women. We understand other women have come forward. If he keeps saying he refutes, he doesn't refute, he denies. Can everyone please learn the meaning of words? He hasn't proven them untrue, but he says he's got evidence. Now, and you've been in a court of law many a time. I've only sat on one jury, but one thing it does teach you is that you need to hear both sides. A prosecution case can be brought and sound very convincing, particularly when there's more than one complainant, and then the defence case is brought and people can change their minds. We've seen cases after Me Too, allegations of sexual abuse, sexual misconduct against many famous men over the years, some convicted, some found completely innocent. What do you make of the complaints that have come forward so far and what many people are calling trial by media?
Well, I think there's 2 points there. The first is the allegations that have been made. They are detailed, surprisingly detailed, actually, which is probably why they've cleared the lawyers not only at News International, but also at Channel 4. So I think that there are real questions to be asked and answered. And as a consequence of that, I think it's almost a racing certainty that the police have to investigate, given the nature of the allegations. As to the second point about trial by media, clearly that's inappropriate. People who don't have relevant information, people who are untrammeled by knowledge. For example, Elon Musk saying he believes Russell Brand is deeply unhelpful. It doesn't add to the sum total of human knowledge. What we need are careful examinations of what occurred, what was known. So if, as Russell Brand says, he was promiscuous, that's perfectly fine. That's not illegal. You can have the morals of an alley cat, but as long as it's 2 consenting adults, the law won't intervene. The law only intervenes where it is said not to be consensual. And if it's not consensual, then that is a matter that needs to be properly investigated by the proper authorities. And of course, the sooner that happens, the access to information which the police have is better, and also there will be reporting restrictions.
Yeah, well, indeed, and that is a crucial point, isn't it? There is no live criminal investigation at the time. It enables us to talk about it, but it is important to stress that he has denied any wrongdoing, and in a lot of these cases, it is a he said, she said. And again, I think the claims from the women, and we know they would have been legal beyond belief, were credible. Some of them provided some evidence that they would claim, although Russell Brand and others would claim, perhaps would not, like text messages, which would corroborate their version of events. Those text messages in one case could actually not necessarily be seen as corroboration if seen in a different light. There were also some allegations by one woman who says at the age of 16 she had a few months long relationship with Russell Brand when he was 31 years old, but she's accused him of grooming, sending a car to pick her up from school and the like. Her parents have confirmed that relationship did take place. She believes he was controlling. She accused him of one particular sexual assault in that case. What do you make of those allegations, which, again, I must stress, Russell Brand has denied?
Yes, I mean, I think that whilst Russell Brand has the presumption of innocence, it doesn't stop us talking about matters of enormous public interest. And in many ways, getting to the bottom of these things is good for both the accused and the accusers, because ultimately the truth will out. But I think that in relation to the 16-year-old, again, if they're consenting, then it's perfectly lawful. If they are not consenting, or there was an assault in the course of that relationship, then that does create a legal problem, which Mr. Brand would need to answer. But I think the challenge here is emotive terms like grooming, whilst we understand what it says and what it's implying, aren't very helpful, because in these circumstances, Russell Brand has made it abundantly clear that everything was consensual. So if it wasn't consensual, then that it is up to the complainants to make that clear. And I think that it's important that those allegations are properly examined, but they should be examined against the backdrop of, you know, a proper, thorough investigation by lawful authorities. We've seen it done by the media. If there are more women coming out, then there's even more compelling reasons for the police to become involved.
Yeah, but it is always that difficult situation when people are condemned by the word of others. And we've seen cases, some horrific scenes, you know, Harvey Weinstein, and we've got some audio of him pressuring women. We've got numerous women. He's been convicted in a court of law. I feel very uncomfortable that people forget about innocence until proven guilty. I've been accused of siding with Russell Brand. I hold no candle for the man in any direction. But I just do think, you know, woe betide anybody else who gets accused of a crime that they believe they're innocent of, and not getting the protection of the law on that.
But I think, Julia, that's right. But I do think we have the obligation to investigate. Yeah. We've already got the investigations at the broadcasters as to what they knew, and I think in some ways that fills the void, because hopefully facts will come out. And more information, which will either tend to exculpate him or indeed the criminal.
Well, there again, I mean, do you trust the BBC and Channel 4 and Endemol, as they're now owned by a company called Banijay UK, to get to the bottom of this? They're going to be wanting to cover their backsides. Of course they are. They've been accused of basically, you know, covering up poor behaviour. We're back into sort of the Me Too hashtag era of basically, if you're a rich, famous, successful, money-making star, then you can get away with anything, and people not only cover it up, they'll also even, you know, help you with it. But even just down to things like Endemol having and we saw in the Channel 4 Dispatches documentary, in Russell Brand's contract, he'd gone to a clinic to get himself clean of heroin, and then he became, he says in his words, a sex addict, and then got sent to a sex addiction clinic. And then as a result of that, he came out to work for Endemol for the Channel 4 production of Big Brother's Big Mouth. But in his contract, it said that he must not basically have sex with any members of staff. Now, if you've had to put that in the contract, I'd like to point out that is not in my contract, but don't worry, guys, you're safe. But I mean, you know, glib about it, but most people don't have that in their contract for a reason, because it's not something that's a threat. And yet, if you are a production company and you've got a man who's confessed to having a sex addiction, has gone to a clinic, and you've written it into his contract, and then you put young female runners in working with him one-on-one, I mean, you are. I mean, that really, really simple. You put a bloke in with him. That would be such an obvious way. If you do have concerns about his behaviour, that would be a basic duty of care to your young female staff, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think it is, because actually, if the behaviour is inappropriate, then in those circumstances, you shouldn't just essentially condone it by putting males in where you would otherwise use females. I think the problem here is that behaviour that is unacceptable and otherwise inappropriate had been normalised or excused. So, for example, his assistant, who says that he was sitting around in his underpants or something most of the time, that's clearly not appropriate for a workplace. No. Why was that not dealt with at the time? That's not necessarily a criminal act, but it's certainly a breach of employment law. We wouldn't expect that if we go into the office. So there are employment issues here where I think that both the broadcasters and others would be vulnerable. And I think the question is, particularly where there's this sort of power imbalance between a star who is huge, commercial, and very much liked, in those circumstances, were Nelsonic eyes effectively shown to behaviour that would otherwise, for anyone else in any other workplace, have been essentially resulted in disciplinary or sacking.
Yeah, I think there are going to be lots of issues on that front coming up. Maxime, it was great to talk to you. He's a media lawyer at Howard Kennedy. Thank you for that.